Today we are talking about weapons. The first weapons that we're going to look at are the passive weapons. Now these are the weapons that don't actually do direct attack or change the attacks that you have available to you, but they are the ones that apply to pretty much any mech, any situation. You put it on one mech and it's going to apply to everybody. This passive effect of auto shields, a lot of people really love it, and is a great thing to have actually if you are doing an easy or even normal mode. Getting into hard mode, it's not as critical, and this is why. Most buildings have two, sometimes more, but oftentimes only even one building. So when that building takes damage, often there's nothing left to shield, or if you have a higher powered Vec that does the damage, it's going to destroy the whole building complex, and again, there's nothing left to shield. The benefit being, though, it doesn't require any power, so if you pick it up and you want to try it out, just throw it on there. It actually doesn't come at any core cost to you as well. Now, one thing I do like to have is this repair field when it shows up. I'm not going to go out of my way to purchase it, but if I have it, it is really nice. Repairing one mech will affect all of your mechs. It does require a core, but it's sort of that nice to have. Not something I'm going to seek out, but if it shows up in a time pod, I'm not going to turn it down or turn it away. Stabilizer's possibly my absolute favorite passive weapon. I love, as we talked about in the very first tip was blocking Vec spawning to control the number of Vec on the board. You don't take any more damage now when that happens, which just makes things oh so very nice, and you get out of a lot of tough situations with that one. The psionic receiver, if there is a psion on the board that's giving different effects to the other Vec, it gives you the same effect. I personally would never spend a core on this. It's a very limited functionality, however, it can come in handy if you get it, and if you have a spare core to use, definitely go for it. The networked armor, all mechs gain 1 HP is very nice. You can get up to 2 HP. I would rather spend the actual cores. If you think about this as 1, 2, 3, I'd rather spend 1, 2, 3 cores and get even more health on each individual mech versus doing it through this networked armor. Having pilots survive death is really nice. Let's say you've got Kazak, you don't want to worry about losing him. Not a big deal, drop that on there. Not something I'm going for personally directly, but something that's nice to have. Kickoff boosters, just like it sounds, it doesn't require any power unless you want to have even more movement, but you get more movement once mechs are starting next to each other. It's okay, I guess. Some weapons that we'll get into later have a limited one-time use when we get to more of the active weapons. This allows them to have an additional use. Now, this one is one that there's a lot of different opinions on. Basically, that if your power grid gets down to 1, all buildings will suddenly get a shield. This can save your life in the best circumstances on the final island. However, I found that by the time you're on the final island, you have a lot more alphas and leaders that are going to do more than 1 grid damage, and so your chances of getting down to 1 exactly are a little bit lower. This force amp is possibly one of the best passives in the game as well. Basically, doing bump damage does even more damage. This gets you out of a lot of tight spots, and there are things, other weapons where you can move Vec around with those weapons, where having a force amp becomes additionally powerful. So now we're looking at the prime class weapons. These are the basic guys that look like they're walking on 2 legs. Next we've got explosive vents. Now explosive vents, just as they see, they blast out all adjacent tiles. Think about the siege mech that is based upon where you're standing. You can upgrade that to get up up to about, looks like 3 damage total. You've got to spend 5 cores total, so be careful on that one. However, it is a nice push option to have on your prime mech if you so choose. Another option is this Mercury Fist, where you're smashing the ground doing 4 damage. It's only a one-time use, just so you know. It's only one-time use per battle unless you upgrade that. But it does 4 damage to 1 and pushes the other person away. You can upgrade additional use and additional damage up to 5. But that's a nice thing to have if you want to have more direct damage attack. The Titan Blade is an interesting one to have. You have to be careful using it because you are moving 3 guys in a line straight back. The chances of not running into a building are relatively low, but it is only a one-time use, so that could be something that strategically could come in handy. Not something to replace a primary weapon, but certainly a good additional option. We now have the ability to look at the right hook, really, the Vortex Fist, where basically you attack and you spin everyone around you. Now this is very self-damaging as well, so keep that in mind. This could actually kill yourself very easily. I personally have not found many uses where this one actually comes in handy, because you have to be in a very open space, not around any buildings, and that rarely happens. Or why would you care anyways about hitting all of these guys and flipping them around? But yet there it is, we can certainly do that. Throwing a rock to launch one. This is in a direct line and will hit directly against it until it hits an obstacle and will drop down. This is a strategic one that you could use to, say, block Vex spawning behind someone, especially if you want to take someone out. Does require a lot of power, but you can level this up to get up to then 4 damage. Very, very cool from that perspective. Kind of like the right hook, we now have the Sidewinder fist that we'll look at. Again, you got to power this one up, you can get it to more damage. A little more usability is it's just one mech that you're controlling at a time and moving him one tile to the left. I like this one, not one I'm going to go out and buy, but if I've got additional cores, it's one that I like to drop on there for more versatility of attacks. The Prime Spear one is a great, actually, attack to have because it does damage to more than just one mech. It's actually something that if I have the, say, Blitzkrieg and I have the Lightning mech and I don't have him upgraded all the way, this is a nice weapon to drop in, even though it requires a lot of additional cores, but it can get really pretty effective if you level it all the way up. The Brute class now, and we have a different range of weapons here, all of which that allow you to basically transform how your Brute class behaves in most instances. One of my favorites starts off right off the bat is these aerial bombs. You're basically turning your Brute class into a jet mech. Now if you think of actually combining this with the ability to maybe have someone have a passive where the smoke damage is increased, very effective combination, especially because you can actually increase this range as well, just like you can with the jet mech. Our next one is the phase cannon. We're able to fire and shoot through buildings to hit projectiles behind it. This is actually a very nice weapon if you can pick it up. Allows you to not have to worry about getting around a building, but can instead just shoot someone away, especially if they're sitting there directly attacking and having webbed the building. And one really nice upgrades the ability to shield through things that you phase through. So again, keep that in mind. This is a good one to look out for. The next one is this defensive shrapnel. I have found limited use to this one. Now, it doesn't require any cores and gives you some additional movement. So if you see it for free, I would personally sell it, but it's one you can drop in without any additional effect. We have the rail cannon. The further you get away, the more damage that you will actually do to the target. That's nice to have on really open maps. This one has very, very limited use in the final island, so I don't tend to actually go with that weapon in particular. The shrapnel cannon, very nice direct line attack, which pushes in 3 different directions, but also does direct damage. You only get 1 use per battle unless you level it up, so keep that in mind if you pick up the shrapnel cannon. The Astra bombs, we're leaping over and dropping bombs. I actually tend to sell this one. If I'm going to be dropping bombs, I want to put smoke on somebody so that I can actually negate their attack, especially because this one is a limited use as well that you have to then level up. The final one that we're going to look at actually is this Hermes engine, where you can dash through and move everyone in opposite directions. It only costs 1 core, but honestly, personally, I think that is too much. You have to have a really open area, and you have to hope you're not pushing anyone, including your own mechs, into other buildings. It requires a lot of planning and tends to hurt you more than it actually will save you. And here we are at the ranged class of mech weapon. First being this micro artillery with a projectile to launch multiple small projectiles. It's really nothing special until you start to level it up, where then I have the ability to do 2 additional tiles as well as additional damage. The problem with this one is leveling it up does cost a lot and often not worth the effort. Let's check out the mortar. This is where I can fire 2 different projectiles, do damage to 2 different things, which I can increase that damage and move things away in opposite directions. Now this is one that you run into a lot of danger with not having the space to actually use this one effectively, but especially if you get it leveled up, it can be a very effective weapon. Leave it up to you if you decide you want to play around with that one. I'd put that one kind of in medium range of usefulness. Smoke mortar, very, very similar, except for the tile that you hit gets dropped in smoke and it pushes it to adjacent. Again, same type of problem. Again, this one you cannot level up though, so it's limited effectiveness. It does not do any direct damage. And for moving around, I would say unless you get this one for free, I wouldn't bother getting it and powering it up. I would sell it for reputation. Burning mortar is really nice, especially if you have the flame behemoths and you want to do even more fire damage to everywhere. Oh, and I should also mention the self-damage happens when you actually launch it. Raining Death is something that is a nice to have. It does 2 damage to everything it does 1 damage to everything it passes over and 2 damage to your actual target if everyone's lined up nicely like these Vec are. However, it will damage buildings unless you have buildings immune, and you can increase that to 2 and 3. This is one that, again, it costs a lot to level up and may probably not be any better than your actual default shot, but something that can really change how you play and your play style. Heavy artillery, it basically is a wide area attack. Got to be careful about hitting buildings on that one. Relatively self-explanatory. The last one though I'd get at is these Gemini missiles. We're again launching 2 missiles doing 3 damage. This one you've only got 1 use per battle, which you can power up, and you can also bring the damage up to 4. This is very useful in a couple of limited circumstances, so it's actually nice to have. If I get this one, I'm going to power it up. I'm not going to particularly look for it necessarily, but it is something that you can power up to use very, very effectively. We're now on to the science class, so getting close to the end here. This is the last class-specific mech weapons that we can look at. And we're going to start right up here with the Confused Shot. This is very similar to what would be in your Frozen Titans with your Prime Mech there, being able to flip around. Now, it does not do any direct damage. However, as you can see, it is free. If you get it, it's worthwhile just to pick up, drop in there to a free slot within your Science Mech. Smoke Pellets. This is a one-time use, which you can obviously upgrade. The ability to just drop smoke around you to negate attack of any of the Vec around you. That is a nice thing to have. I'll drop Smoke Pellets in if I get it. Obviously, no power to use, so very effective there. Fire Beam is one that I really won't pick up unless I absolutely have no other choice or have a free grid. The reason being is you have to require a power to use it, and it's a one-time use, and all it does is set tiles on fire, not even doing direct damage. So you're not really left controlling the Vec in any way. Especially if you get into, say, hard mode where the Vec have a lot more health. This just isn't going to be enough firepower to bring to the table to warrant bringing 1 or 2 cores into it. The next one, Frostbeam, possibly one of the best secondary weapons that you can pick up in the game, one that's not by default on it. It does require 2 frost beams as well as an additional 2 core to get the frost beam running, then 2 additional if you want 1 per, but you can freeze in a row. So dropping this on your Science Mech fully powered means 2 out of your 4 to 5 turns per region you can frost Vec in a line. You could frost as many as you could possibly hit up until you hit a structure like a mountain or a building, and yes, it will freeze that building as well, which is very, very useful in order to give that building some extra defense. So I'd highly recommend it. If you see it, if you pick it up, drop it in your science class and power it. Something that I have not mentioned either throughout this whole time is that you can actually put any weapon onto a different class. For example, if I hop over to my Brute class, if I pull this over, it just requires an additional cost to use, an additional core, because it's not of the right class. I have actually dropped the Frost Cannon into a Brute class before just because it is that good of a weapon, and spent 5 cores fully powering it up. It is absolutely worth it if it is the right weapon. Next is the Shield Array. This one requires a little bit to power up. However, if you look at what you can do with it, you can actually shield a massive number of buildings, including actually Vec and Mech as well, so be careful about that. But it's one-time use unless you power it up to twice, but is very, very useful to be able to quickly shield a lot of things. Very, very helpful in the final battle, final island, where things are clustered close together to really protect that bomb, protect those pylons, etc. Last science class secondary weapon is the Push Beam. Pushes all units in a line. There you can see it actually does no direct damage. You can power this up to unlimited use, which if you're going to use this, I'd highly recommend dropping it into both so that you've got as many pushes as possible. So here's our last group of weapons, guys. We're going to be talking through support and deployables. These basically apply to any class, it doesn't matter, and some of them are very, very useful and can absolutely change your game, especially those deployables we'll get to later. So this one here, Boosters, this is a nice one to have. If it throws up for free, I'd probably sell it. It's just a leap over and can push things away. Now, that's very nice to have if you've got a class of, say you've got somebody in your science class that you're not using effectively and want to give them additional ability to move around. Boosters can be a nice thing to have if you have it there for free already. Smoke bombs we've seen many times before. Again, we can get more and more range, turn any class of mech into a mecha crop duster, which is really nice to have, especially if you've got some passives on there where you can, say, damage when someone's dropped into smoke. But every time I see smoke bombs, I grab it. It is very useful to give you that additional attack. Now there's this heat converter where you freeze in front of you and you frost behind you. It's only one use for battle that you can upgrade, but obviously it's something that because it has that frost, I would absolutely pick it up and power it up. This is another really good use. The next one, if you have the Hazardous mechs, I would 100% use self-destruct. Now you can see what happens is you absolutely kill yourself, but you also insta-kill anybody around you, even if that is a leader on the final island. Now, what I will tell you, if you have the passive where upon killing an enemy you heal, your pilot will not die. You'll actually resurrect, and if you were to do what's being shown in the graphic right there, you would actually heal 3 right away. For hazardous mechs, this is one of the best support weapons that you can pick up. Absolutely go for it, 100% if you can see it. Targeted strike just drops a quick strike with 1 hit, 1 use per battle, and pushes away. Worth selling, but if you have it, nice to have, I suppose, until you get to that final area. Same thing with dropping smoke. It's free, you can use it. It's probably better to get the 1 reputation point though and move right along. Similar vein where you have 1 use per battle where you can do a free heal including disabled mechs. That can be a lifesaver, but it's something that I would personally rather sell in order to fully get as much reputation as possible. Now we're getting into the 2 that I would absolutely look at using. This missile barrage powered up to get 2 damage. It basically hits everything on the board. Only really 1-time use per battle, which again, you've got other passives you could use if you wanted to change that. But this can be a very nice thing, especially early game, or if there's a guy who's out of range, but you can take him out with 1 or 2 hit points. Can be very, very useful to bring on. My absolute favorite weapon in the game that's not ice related though is this wind turret, especially because you can upgrade it to unlimited uses. Basically you're moving the entire board one direction or another. You have to watch out for bumping yourself or your enemy into grid though, as that will take grid down, so you have to be very careful and strategic about how you plan it out. But considering the Vec are not thinking about the fact that you have this weapon, you can completely change their desired attacks, get them to attack each other, drop off a cliff, run into buildings, etc. Very, very useful and powerful weapon. Now here's another frost one that I would recommend picking up as well, especially if you can get a pilot with a shield, is this ice generator. Freeze anything adjacent to you. In fact, you can increase that size to be a pretty substantial range. Very, very powerful. Again, only 1 use per battle, so use it strategically, but something that when fully powered up with all 5 cores can be a really, really effective weapon. Okay, that's it for support. We're going to talk about deployables now. I've actually got these preloaded in here already as well. These are where you can use a turn instead of doing your regular attack. You can actually power up to deploy other support things like tanks. This is a tank that will be doing no damage, but simply push people around and actually becomes bait for the Vec to attack. Deployables probably the most underrated by new players, but most powerful thing if you can learn how to use them well when you see them. They're very expensive, yes, but very useful, especially if you can see I can get him to do additional 2 damage and push and additionally getting health. So these can be basically like getting an additional mech on the board. Very, very highly recommended. We also have a shield tank which can throw a shield. That's relatively useful, not as useful as the push tank, but you can shield buildings with that, and it can also be utilized as a projectile as opposed to getting right next to it. Not as useful, but still good. I like the acid tanks because they have the ability to deploy acid, which makes Vec more vulnerable to being hit. I wouldn't give them more health. I would go right towards powering them up and giving them push, which means you can push and you can have acid inflicted to your Vec, which I think is a great combination on hard mode. The one that I'm not as huge of a fan of is the pull tank. You have to get them in position to make them really effective. I'd much rather push than pull. Pull tanks are probably the only ones that I would probably sell instead of deploying. They're a little expensive for the benefit that you get out of them. But that is it for the support and the deployables. I would highly, highly, highly recommend looking at those deployables. Try them out, figure out what works well for you. I think these can significantly change the game, add a new element that you hadn't thought of before of how to win into the breach. So that brings us to the end of yet another tutorial video, this one going through the weapons that you can find in addition to what's on the actual squads themselves. If you missed any of the other ones, check out the link below where you can see all the other tutorials in this series. We got one to go, guys. We're going to be talking about speedrunning next. I'm very excited about this next one. I enjoy running into the breach. I think it's a game anyone can pick up to speedrun once you get the basics of what's going on. But you can find me here with more of those videos, or you can also find me on Twitch. Again, the link is below. I appreciate you guys tuning in, and we'll talk to you next time. See you later.